My name is Erin Cole. I'm 31 years old and my life is on hold. New York City always feels like it is rebuilding from something. After the pandemic, the concrete feels harder, the people more brittle. They are pushing glass and steel towers up all along the East River, trying to erase the grit. But the grit is the only thing that is real. These days, the criminals wear bespoke suits and sit on logistics boards. They call them moguls until the RICO indictments come down, and social media, that great swirling drain of opinion, decides who you are faster than any court of law. I learned that the hard way. I am, or rather I was, an emergency room nurse, one of the good ones. Then I spoke up. I filed a report that the hospital was cutting corners on sterile supplies, that they were stretching resources to the breaking point, so they suspended me. Then, to make sure I was truly radioactive, the board sued me for defamation. So now, I live in a tiny apartment in Long Island City. It is all I can afford. My only sanity is the river. I run the pathways every evening, pushing myself until my lungs burn. It is the only time I feel like I can breathe, like the weight of the lawyers and the whispers is not crushing me. Tonight, the air is heavy, wet, that smell of ozone and wet pavement that means the sky is about to open. I should turn back, but I keep pushing. I need the burn. The rain hits. It is not a gentle shower. It is a cold, driving sheet of water. The river turns black, the surface choppy and mean. That is when I hear it. Not a scream, just a sharp splash, followed by a gasp. It is a sound that is too small for this storm. I stop, squinting into the darkness near the old gantry pier. There is debris in the water, trash, an oil slick shimmering under the lights from Manhattan. And then I see it, a hand, a small, pale hand, flapping weakly. My brain does not engage. My training does. My jacket is on the pavement. My hair is yanked back in one hard motion. I do not feel the cold when I hit the water. It is a void. A black shock that steals my breath. The current is vicious, pulling toward the barges. I swim toward the memory of the splash. He's there, tangled in plastic sheeting and what looks like a broken piece of a wooden pallet. A boy. He cannot be more than 6 years old, and his eyes are wide open, staring at nothing. I have you. The words are ripped from my throat by the wind. I hook my arm under his chest. He is a dead weight. He's not breathing. I fight the river. It is a living thing, trying to pull us both under. My legs are numb. My arms are on fire, but I push. The concrete embankment is a sheer cliff, but I find a foothold, ignoring the sharp pain as my knee slams into the edge. I haul him up, collapsing onto the walkway. Come on, kid, breathe. My fingers are clumsy, but I check his airway. It is clear. I tilt his head back. I start compressions, 1 and 2 and 3 and 4. My emergency room mind takes over. My hands are steady. Push hard, push fast. I pinch his nose. My mouth covers his. I breathe into him. Once, twice, the taste is river water, algae and panic. Breathe, damn it, breathe for me. I go back to compressions. The rain is a silver wall. Suddenly, headlights slice the darkness. A black sport utility vehicle, the kind that looks armored, skids to a stop on the access road. Its doors fly open before it has even fully stopped. The small chest under my hands suddenly hitches. The boy gives a violent, choking cough. Water, thick and dirty, sputters from his mouth. He takes a ragged, raw breath and then he wails. It is the single greatest sound I have ever heard. I fall back, gasping, my entire body shaking. Men in dark, tailored suits are suddenly surrounding us. One man pushes through them. He's different, tall, maybe 38 years old. His suit is impossibly expensive, cut perfectly, and now it is soaked through with rain. He does not seem to notice. He drops to his knees. His eyes find the boy. Nico, he whispers. It is a prayer. Then his eyes find mine. They are the color of amber, or maybe old whiskey, and they are cold, colder than the river. He looks at me with a raw, assessing power. He's not looking at a savior. He's looking at a problem he cannot solve, but I see it. Beneath that layer of absolute control, I see the terror. It is a primitive panic, and it makes his large, capable hands tremble as he reaches for his son. He strips off his own suit jacket, wrapping the boy in it. "Nico, Papa is here. I have you." One of his men, a bulky shadow, offers me a hand. I ignore him, pushing myself to my feet. The man, the father, looks at me again. His voice is a quiet rumble that cuts right through the storm. "You saved him." "He was not breathing," I say. My voice is hollow. "He needs a hospital. He needs to be checked for secondary drowning." "We will handle it." The man scoops his son into his arms. Nico just cries, burying his face in his father's neck. "He is Matteo Valente. I do not know this yet. I do not know that he is the chief executive officer of Valente Logistics, the name I see on construction sites and five-star restaurants. I do not know that the Justice Department refers to him as the heir to the Valente network, a polite word for a criminal organization they have been trying to pin down for 2 decades. I just know he is the father. And I know, looking at the men fanning out, securing the perimeter, that I am in trouble. I walk home. I stand in my own shower for almost an hour, shaking. By morning, my life is over. Someone filmed it, a shaky, terrible video from an apartment window across the river. You can see the headlights slicing the rain. You can see my frantic compressions. You can see the men in black suits. My face is on every morning show. Hero nurse saves drowning boy. By noon, the second wave hits. Boy identified as Nico Valente, son of reclusive mogul Matteo Valente. The news vans are parked outside my small building. They are not calling me a hero anymore. They are asking questions. How did I happen to be there? Do I know the Valente family? Then, the hospital I am suing, the one that is suing me, releases their statement. While we commend the actions of Miss Cole, she's not currently an active employee pending an internal review. The internet does the rest. The speculation is toxic. Was it an accident? Was it a failed kidnapping? Was it an assassination attempt on a 6-year-old child? And who was I, the suspended nurse, the opportunist, the girl looking for a payday? My quiet fight for my career is gone. I am no longer Erin Cole. I am now a footnote in the violent, glittering story of the Valente family. 2 days later, they find me. Not the media, him. I am leaving my apartment to meet my legal aid lawyer, a man I cannot possibly afford, when 2 of the men from the riverbank are simply there, in my hallway. They move like shadows. "Miss Cole, Mr. Valente requests a moment of your time." It is not a request. The same black sport utility vehicle is waiting. This time, I get in. He is in the back. He does not look like the terrified father by the river. He looks like the man who runs corporations and, according to the whispers, the waterfront. His amber eyes are steady, controlled. "Miss Cole, I will not waste your time. You saved my son's life." "I'm glad he is okay," I say, my hands clasped so tightly my knuckles are white. "He is changed. He's traumatized." He looks out the tinted window. He will not go near water, not a bath, not a sink. He wakes up screaming. He pauses, and for just a second, the father is back. He asks for you. He calls you the river lady. I wait. I know this is not a social call. "I have a proposal," he says, turning his gaze back to me. "I want you to work for me, as a therapeutic companion for Nico, to be there, to help him move past this fear." I almost laugh. The sound is harsh, bordering on hysterical. "Mr. Valente, I am an emergency room nurse. I am not a child psychologist. You are the person he associates with survival. He trusts you." He names a number, a weekly salary. It is more than I made in 3 months at the hospital. It is enough to pay my lawyers and live for a year. "And," he adds, his voice smooth, "my lawyers are very good. I understand you are having some legal trouble with your former employer. Perhaps that situation could, be resolved." There it is, the golden cage, the payment. My blood, which had been buzzing with adrenaline, runs cold. This is the very thing I was suspended for. The idea that care, that safety, that ethics could be negotiated. I do not sell my kindness. I say, the words are sharp, brittle. He does not flinch. He does not look insulted. His expression softens, just slightly. I'm not buying your kindness, Miss Cole. I am buying your time and your skill, my son. He is all I have. I knew his wife had died, cancer, 2 years ago. The media had been relentless. I look out the window. We are parked on a quiet street in Brooklyn, outside one of his restaurants, an old brick building that smells like garlic and money. I cannot be bought, I say, firmer this time. My ethics as a nurse are not for sale, not to my old hospital and not to you. I think of Nico, his small face, blue and terrified, the sound of his wail when the air finally hit his lungs. I'm sorry about your son, I say, and I mean it. I truly am, but I cannot accept. I open the heavy door. I fully expect one of his men to stop me. They do not. He just watches me, his face an unreadable mask. I walk away. My principles are intact. My bank account is empty. The lawsuit is waiting. I am still drowning, just in a different way. That night, I find it. It is not an email. It is not a text. It is in my physical mailbox, the one in the lobby of my building. It is tucked inside a junk mail flyer for a pizza place. A plain white envelope, inside just a few words, cut from a magazine and pasted onto cardstock. Stay away from the Valente family. If you want to keep breathing. My blood does not run cold. It freezes. This is not the hospital's legal team. This is not an internet troll. This is real. This is the world I just tried to walk away from. They were not trying to silence me. They were warning me. Or perhaps they were threatening him, using me as a message. I realized the truth. The moment I jumped into that river, I stopped being a bystander. I became a witness. I became a piece on a board I did not even know existed. My refusal does not make me safe. It just makes me alone. I am 31 years old. I am unemployed. I am being sued by a major hospital. And now, someone is threatening my life because I saved a child. I do not sleep. At 5 a.m, I find the business card one of his men had left on my table, a single name, Rocco, and a phone number. I make the call. He meets me within the hour, the same sport utility vehicle, the same quiet intensity. The city is just waking up, gray and cold. You changed your mind, Matteo Valente says. It is not a question. I hand him the envelope with the note. He looks at the pasted words. His face hardens into something I have not seen before. It is not the father's panic. It is not the chief executive officer's control. It is something colder. It is the calculating calm of a man who understands violence intimately. They know where I live. I say, my voice is shaking, and I hate it. He looks up from the note, his amber eyes locking onto mine. If you work for me, you will be protected. My son will be protected. I have conditions, I say, finding a sliver of strength. This is not what you offered before. I am not your employee. I am a private contractor, 2 days a week, maybe 3, strictly focused on Nico's therapy and recovery. I retain my independence. I am not one of your people, and I have the right to walk away at any time. He watches me, listens. He nods slowly. Agreed, with one addition. What? Anytime you are with my son or traveling to and from my home, you will have protection. My protection. His eyes narrow. This is not negotiable. He is not asking to protect me. He's ensuring the security of the situation. I am now a variable he has to manage. Fine, Dieu, I say. The deal is made. I look at this man, this father who is terrified, and this man who is terrifying. I did not just save his son. I tied my life to his, and I still do not know if that plunge into the East River was an accident or if I just pulled his boy from the opening shots of a war. The Valente compound was not a penthouse. It was an old brick fortress in Brooklyn, walled off from the world, with a garden that smelled of rosemary and damp earth. My new life began there. governed by the quiet clicks of locks and the constant, silent presence of men in dark suits, my protection or my jailers. My first session with Nico was in an indoor therapeutic pool. The air was warm and thick with the clean scent of chlorine, a stark contrast to the river. The water was heated to 90 degrees, but to Nico, it was the East River. He was 6 years old, but he carried the trauma like a physical weight. He sat by the edge, knees pulled to his chest, and refused to look at the water. "Hey, Nico," I said, keeping my voice low and steady, the way I used to in the emergency room when a patient was panicking. "We are not going to swim today. We are just going to teach the water how to breathe. Watch me." I sat on the edge, put my mouth to the surface, and blew a stream of bubbles. He shook his head, his dark hair falling over his eyes. "The water is bad." "The water is just water," I said gently. "It does not think. It does not feel. We are the ones who do the thinking." We spent an hour on the tile, and he would not touch it. His terror was absolute. Matteo had told me about the nightmares. He would meet me by the door to the pool area, never coming in, as if his presence would break the fragile spell. He stood, a tall shadow in a perfect suit, his hands clasped behind his back. "He screams in his sleep," he told me, his voice a low rumble. "He talks about a sound, a metal sound, and a green light. He says the green light was watching him. His mind is replaying the trauma," I explained, trying to make sense of it. "The sound, the light, those are the details his brain snagged onto. They are the anchors of his fear. I want them gone." "That is not how it works. We do not make them go away. We make them small. We teach him that he is big, and they are small." By the third session, he had progressed to sitting on the steps, letting the warm water lap at his ankles. He was still terrified. The pool was covered by a massive glass atrium. It was dark outside, and the stars were sharp and clear. Nico looked up. "I do not like the dark." I followed his gaze. "You see that group of stars, the one that looks like a big W?" He squinted. "Yes." "That is Cassiopeia. She was a queen, and when you feel scared, in the dark, you find something real to hold on to. You find the queen, and you take one big breath. You are the boss of your own breathing." I never made promises I could not keep. It was the first rule of nursing. I did not tell him, "You will always be safe." I told him, "I am right here." I did not say, "It will not happen again," and I said, "You are learning how to be strong." He finally looked at the water. He took a breath. He dipped his chin and blew a tiny stream of bubbles. He gasped, pulling back, and then he looked at me. He smiled. It was not a big smile. It was a watery, tentative thing. But it was real. "I did it, Aaron." "You did it, Nico." From the corner of my eye, I saw movement. Matteo was standing in the shadows of the doorway, as always, but he was not still. He had leaned forward, his entire body rigid. He was watching his son, who was sitting in the water and smiling. It was the first time, he told me later, that Nico had smiled near water since the river. The bubble of the Valente compound was thick, but the outside world was loud. The tabloids were having a field day. Hero Nurse Land's millionaire mogul, from suspended nurse to mafia nanny. They called me an opportunist, a gold digger. Then it got worse. An anonymous source leaked my entire disciplinary file from the hospital. Every report I had filed, every time I had been written up for insubordination because I demanded proper sterile kits. It was all over the internet, painted to look like I was a dangerous, unstable employee fired for cause. Matteo summoned me to his study. It was the first time I had been in that room. It was not an office. It was a library. Dark wood, leather-bound books that looked hundreds of years old, and the faint, sweet smell of cured tobacco. He was standing by the window, not looking at me. "I can make this stop." "Stop how?" "I have resources, the websites that posted your file, the columnists. I can persuade them that it is not in their best interest to continue." A cold spike of adrenaline shot through me. You mean threaten them? Shut them down? I shook my head, my hands clenching. No. He turned, one eyebrow raised. He was genuinely confused. Why they are slandering you? They are interfering with your ability to care for my son. Because they are using the truth, just twisting the context, I said, my voice shaking slightly. I was suspended for telling the truth. Mr. Valente, I will not start my new life by hiding from it. If I do, I prove them right. I prove that I am guilty of something. He watched me for a long, silent minute. The clock on his mantelpiece was the only sound. You are difficult, Miss Cole. I am consistent, I replied. His world was anything but. I was not supposed to know about his business, but I was not blind. The number of guards at the gates had doubled. I saw men I'd never seen before, men with hard faces and Eastern European accents, and I saw Rocco DeSanto. Rocco was Matteo's advisor, his consigliere if I believed the tabloids. He was older, with immaculate silver hair and eyes as pale and cold as a winter sky. He had been with Matteo's father. He looked at me as if I were something he had found on the bottom of his shoe. I was leaving the pool house one afternoon when I overheard them. Their voices were raised, carrying from the study down the marble hall. She is a liability. Matteo? Rocco's voice was a sharp, angry growl. She is a magnet for trouble. She is helping my son. Matteo's reply was clipped, cold. And what good is that if he is not safe? Victor Markov is not stupid. He's pushing on our territory, and he sees this. He sees the child, and he sees this nurse. She is the roadmap right to him. The name Victor Markov made my skin crawl. I had read it in the financial pages, and in the crime reports. He was the new power on the waterfront, a phantom from the wreckage of the Eastern Bloc. He was fighting Matteo for control of the container shipping routes. The battle was over logistics, both clean and dirty. Markov sees Nico as the soft target. Rocco pressed. He sees a father distracted. This woman, she makes you look weak. Get rid of her. Pay her off. Send her to another continent. This is not the time for sentiment. There was a silence. Then Matteo spoke, and his voice was so cold it burned. She stays. And Victor Markov will not get within a mile of my son. You handle the port, Rocco. I will handle my home. I heard heavy footsteps. Rocco stormed out of the study. He saw me standing there, clutching a small, inflatable pool toy. He did not slow down. He just looked at me. His eyes filled with contempt. His look said it all. You are the one who will get us all killed. Rocco was right about one thing. I was a magnet. They came on my day off, back at my apartment in Long Island City. I had refused Matteo's offer to move me, clinging to my last shred of independence. The 2 guards he had posted in my building lobby were a constant, unsettling reminder of my new reality. The knock on my door was sharp, official. I opened it to a woman in a perfectly tailored gray suit. She had a sharp haircut and even sharper eyes. Erin Cole. She did not wait for me to answer, holding up a badge. Assistant District Attorney Helena Quinn. I need to come in. She was not asking. She walked past me, her heels clicking on my cheap laminate floor. She stopped at my small window, looking out at the river where it had all started. You are in a difficult position, Miss Cole, she said, her back to me. You saved a child. That is commendable. But you are now a paid employee of a man my office has been investigating for 5 years. You are on the Valente payroll. I am a private contractor, I said, my voice defensive. I am a pediatric therapist, Nasanux. You are an accessory, Quinn said, turning. Her eyes were devoid of sympathy. You are staff. You are inside the walls. That makes you complicit in whatever happens next. And trust me, something is always next. That is ridiculous. She walked to my tiny kitchen counter and dropped a heavy file. Is this ridiculous? I looked. The top page was a photograph, a man, huddled on the pavement of a loading dock. His face was a ruin of blood and swelling. That man is a union organizer at the Red Hook Terminal, she said, her voice a flat, clinical monotone. 2 days ago, He refused to change his vote on a cargo zoning contract, a contract Matteo Valente needs. My hand was shaking as I lifted the photo. The next one was a grainy, long-distance shot. Two men walking away from the scene. I recognized them. I had seen them in Matteo's garden. Matteo Valente talks a good game about legitimacy, Quinn said, leaning in. He wants the clean contracts, the glass towers, but he still uses his father's old, dirty tools to get them. She tapped the file. So you have a choice. You are the only person who has been inside that house who is not blood or paid muscle. You can be a federal witness. You tell us what you see, what you hear. You wear a wire, or you can sync with them, because I promise you, Aaron, they are going down, and everyone with them. My stomach turned over. The violence of it, the cold, calculated brutality. This was the man whose son I was teaching to float. I stared at the photos long after she was gone. I felt sick. This was the world I had accepted. This was Matteo. But it was not my gut, the intuition that had saved my life in the emergency room more times than I could count, was screaming. Matteo was capable of this. The man with the cold amber eyes was absolutely capable of this. But he was also the man who stood in the dark, just to hear his son laugh. He was the man who had told me, in a rare moment of vulnerability, that he wanted to legitimize the entire network before Nico was old enough to understand what his family name meant. My intuition told me two things with absolute certainty. One, Matteo Valente was not a clean man. Two, he was not the one who ordered his son to be thrown in that river. That act was desperate, sloppy, and personal. It was not a calculated business move. It was an attack on him. I went back to the compound the next day. The drive was silent. The guards outside my apartment were now my chauffeurs. I was a prisoner of my own protection. I needed to know. When I first agreed to this, I had asked for the items Nico was wearing that night. I claimed it was for sensory therapy, a way to reintroduce the items in a safe environment. They had given them to me. The clothes were ruined, but the small, bright orange life vest had been stored in a plastic bin. I went to the pool house storage room and locked the door. I pulled out the bin. I lifted the vest. The foul, brackish smell of the East River was still there, faint and sour, but underneath it, there was something else. A chemical smell. I am a nurse. I know the scent of hospitals. This was not it. This was industrial. It was sharp, greasy. It was heavy machine oil, not from a car, something bigger, like a crane, like a cargo container lift. My heart was hammering. The gantry pier, where I found him, was all parkland and refurbished docks, the nearest heavy machinery. I was Pier 39, I whispered. Matteo's pier. I did not wait. I found him in the library. Rocco was with him. I did not care. Mr. Valente. They both looked up. Rocco's eyes narrowed. What is it, Aaron? Matteo asked. The life vest, the one Nico was wearing. It smells like heavy machine oil. Why? Matteo's face went utterly blank. Rocco took a half step forward. Where did you find him? Matteo asked, his voice dangerously quiet. Near the gantry pier. But that is just parkland, the closest heavy machinery. Athene is Pier 39. He finished. His face was pale. He was not acting guilty. He was calculating. My main cargo terminal. There is something else, and I said, the pieces clicking together. The nightmares, the metal sound, the green light. Matteo looked at Rocco. The new container cranes. What color are their indicator lights? Rocco did not answer. Matteo slammed his hand on the desk. What color? Green, Rocco whispered. They are green. Matteo turned, his eyes on fire. When he was not looking at me, he was looking through me. He grabbed the phone on his desk. Get me the security logs for Pier 39 for the night of the accident. All of them. Now. He hung up and stared at Rocco. My son was on that pier. We waited. It was the longest 10 minutes of my life. A guard came in, holding a tablet. He handed it to Matteo. Matteo stared at it, his face turning to stone. What is it? Rocco asked. "The camera," Matteo said, his voice lethal. "They were not just off, they were looped. The footage repeated the same sequence for 19 minutes. He looked at Rocco, his eyes burning with a cold fury I had never seen. 19 minutes. My son was on my pier, with my security, and someone looped the feed, someone on the inside. Rocco looked at me, his face pale, his eyes full of pure hatred. He was not looking at a hero. He was looking at the person who had just lit the fuse to his entire world. And I was looking at Matteo, a man who had just realized his fortress had been breached. The attack had not come from Victor Markov. It had come from within. The silence in the library was heavier than stone. Matteo's face was a mask of cold fury. He looked at Rocco, but his voice, when he spoke, was aimed at the guard by the door. "Find the security supervisor who was on duty at Pier 39, the one who missed the loop. Find him now. I want to know who he spoke to, who he ate with, and where he is." He turned back to Rocco, his voice dropping to a lethal whisper. "My son was taken from my pier. My pier, someone will answer for this." Rocco looked sick, his usual immaculate composure gone. He knew what this meant. This was not an outside threat. This was a serpent in the garden. But the world outside, the world of appearances and obligations, did not stop. 2 nights later, Matteo insisted we attend the annual Children's Hospital fundraiser. It was an event his late wife had championed. "We cannot go," I said, horrified. "We were standing in the grand foyer. Not after this. Not when you know someone on the inside." "We must go," Matteo countered, his jaw tight as he buttoned his tuxedo jacket. "We must look normal. We must look strong. Victor is watching. He wants me to panic. He wants me to hide my son. Hiding Nico tells him he has already won. We will go, we will smile, and you will be by Nico's side every second." It was a trial by fire. I was not a nurse. I was not a contractor. I was, for all intents and purposes, part of the facade. The black sport utility vehicle was, as always, armored. The moment we stepped out onto the red carpet at the hotel, the flashes were blinding. The media descended like sharks. They were not polite. "Mr. Valente, is it true the boy's fall was a warning from your rivals?" "Miss Cole, how much is he paying you to play the girlfriend?" "Aaron, is it true you were fired for gross negligence?" I instinctively put my body between the cameras and Nico, who was clinging to my hand, his small face pale with fright. Matteo's hand landed on the small of my back. It was a possessive, protective gesture, meant entirely for the cameras, but it sent a shockwave of heat through my system. "My son is here to support his mother's legacy," Matteo said, his voice a calm, cold blade that cut through the noise. "Shame on you for frightening a child." He guided us through the throng, and in the crowd, standing near a marble pillar, I saw her, Assistant District Attorney Helena Quinn. She was not shouting questions. She was not dressed for a gala. She was standing back, watching, holding her smartphone up. She was not taking pictures of the celebrities. She was documenting me. She was documenting Nico. She was documenting Matteo's hand on my back. She was building her case. Frame by frame, I was no longer a witness. In her eyes, I was evidence of his recruitment, another asset he had acquired. The ride home was tense. The event itself had been a blur of fake smiles. Nico had finally fallen asleep against my shoulder in the car, exhausted by the stress. "You handled that well," Matteo said quietly. He was staring out the tinted window. "I'm not used to being called a prostitute in front of 3 major news networks," I said, my voice tight. Before he could answer, the world lurched. A heavy sedan, black and unmarked, slammed into our escort vehicle, the one directly behind us. The sound was a dull, sickening crunch of metal. Our driver did not panic. He spun the wheel, the heavy sport utility vehicle fishtailing as the driver expertly regained control. Another car, identical to the first, tried to cut us off. "Get down!" Matteo roared. He shoved my head and Nico's down below the window level, shielding both of us with his own large body. I heard the squeal of tires, a sickening scrape, but no gunshots. The driver was shouting codes into a microphone. This was not a firefight. It was a message. It was a high-speed shoulder check on a New York City freeway. Our driver took an exit I did not recognize, a hard right that sent us screeching onto a dark industrial street. He wove through a series of warehouses. The other cars did not follow. They had made their point. When we were clear, several minutes later, Matteo sat back up. He was breathing hard. He did not look at me first. He checked Nico, his hands running over the sleeping boy's head and arms, assuring himself he was unharmed. Only then did he look at me. "Are you all right?" I nodded, my heart hammering against my ribs. He did not shoot. They did not shoot. "Victor," Matteo said, his voice raw. "He did not want to kill us. He wanted to show me he can get that close, even with my best men." What struck me in that dark, speeding car was Matteo's reaction. The man in the car was not the gangster from ADA Quinn's photographs. He was not the man who ordered hits. He had not ordered his driver to fight back. He had not drawn a weapon. His first and only instinct was to shield his son and me. He had chosen the retreat. He had prioritized safety over pride. That night, the compound felt like a bunker. The number of guards at the gate tripled. I was in the main kitchen, unable to sleep, making myself tea. The house was silent. He found me there, and he had loosened his tie, a rare sight. His jacket was gone. "They will not get near this house," he said. It did not sound like a fact. It sounded like a promise he was desperately trying to make to himself. "That was Victor." He nodded, pouring himself a glass of water. "He wants Pier 39. He wants my logistics hub. He thinks I am weak because I am a father." "Is that what he thinks?" I asked quietly. Matteo looked at me, his amber eyes tired and unguarded for the first time. "My father?" He thought love was a weakness. He built this organization on fear. When he died, I inherited it, all of it, the good and the bad. He ran a hand over his face. "I grew up in the kitchen of one of my father's restaurants. I was an orphan. He took me in, gave me a job. I washed dishes for 10 years before I ever saw a ledger. I learned the business from the floor up, the smells, the people, the cash." This was the most he had ever shared. This was not the boss. This was the man. "My wife," he continued, his voice rough. "Elena, she hated this part of my life. When she got sick, she made me promise. 'Make it clean, Matteo,' she said. 'Make it something Nico can be proud of.' I have been trying, Aaron, for 2 years. I am selling off the old routes, moving into legitimate shipping, real estate, but the old world does not let go easily. Victor, he is the old world. He thrives on chaos." He looked at me, and the boundary between us, employer and contractor, mafia boss and nurse, felt paper thin. It was just a man and a woman, standing in a kitchen in the middle of the night, both of us in over our heads. "He is wrong," Matteo said, his voice low. "My son is not my weakness. He's the only reason I am doing this at all." The vulnerability was magnetic. I felt a pull toward him that had nothing to do with gratitude or fear, and it terrified me. This was a man who could order someone beaten. This was a man who lived in a world of violence, but he was also a man who was trying to crawl out of it. I stepped back, putting my mug down. "I'm glad Nico has you," I said, reestablishing the line. "I should get some sleep." His eyes shuddered. The boss was back. "Good night, Aaron." The next day, the investigation into Pier 39 intensified. Matteo was following my lead, the green light, the metal sound. He had hired an independent digital forensics team, people from outside his own organization. He did not trust anyone. He was right not to. A week later, Assistant District Attorney Quinn's office received an anonymous tip. A new file was leaked. This one was far worse than my disciplinary record. It was a detailed dossier, allegedly from an internal Valente server, showing wire transfer authorizations and coded messages. It supposedly proved Matteo had personally ordered the savage beating of that union organizer. The signature on the bottom of the authorization was a perfect forgery of his own. The media exploded. The federal case was heating up. "She is building a RICO case," Mateo snarled, throwing the newspaper onto his massive library desk. "She thinks she has me. This is fabricated. The signature is flawless." "Is it real?" I asked, my voice small. The beating was real, oh, he admitted, his face grim. But it was not my order. It was rogue, or it was a setup. Someone inside wanted it to happen, to make me look like I was losing control, or to give Quinn the ammunition she needed. "Rocco," I whispered. Mateo's eyes met mine. He did not confirm it. He did not have to. His silence was an answer. Rocco was old guard. Rocco believed in the old ways. Rocco was the one pushing him to be harder, to fight Victor with fire. Or maybe Rocco was working with Victor. The forensics team finally found something. They had torn apart the small orange life vest Nico had been wearing, tucked deep into the foam, shielded by a lead-lined foil packet to block premature signals. Was a device. It was not a simple global positioning system tracker. It was a high-frequency transmitter, military grade. It was not for tracking, the forensics expert told Mateo, his face pale. "This signal is designed to be picked up from a distance, through water. It was a beacon. They put it on him so they could find him in the water. After they threw him in. The blood left my face. It was a test of the beacon. A test of our response times. They wanted to see how long it would take for us to find him." Mateo went utterly silent. He walked to the window, staring out at the garden. The guard, the one who was on duty at the south gate, the one who missed the loop. The expert nodded, closing his briefcase. "He's gone. Mr. Valente vanished, wiped his apartment clean, did not pick up his last paycheck. He did not just quit. He has disappeared." The betrayal hung in the air, thick and poisonous. Mateo knew he had a traitor. He knew, instinctively, that it was Rocco, using a disposable guard as a proxy. But he could not move against him without proof, not without tearing his whole organization apart. The call came late, just after midnight. I was in the library, unable to sleep. Mateo was there too, staring into a cold fireplace, a glass of whiskey untouched in his hand, a dedicated phone on his desk, one I had never seen him use, suddenly buzzed, a low, ominous sound. He picked it up. He did not say hello. He just listened. I watched his face. The color drained from it. His hand gripped the receiver so tightly his knuckles were white. "He's not for sale," Mateo said, his voice a low, vicious growl. He listened again, his eyes closed, a flicker of pure anguish passing over his features. "What does he want?" I asked. As soon as he hung up the phone, slamming it down, Mateo looked at me. The control was gone. He looked haunted. "That was Victor Markov. He wants Pier 39. He wants me to hand over the entire logistics hub, cede the territory, all of it." "Or what?" I whispered, though I already knew. Mateo's voice broke. "Just for a second. Or he finishes what he started. She cannot be there to save him every time." He said, "He knows about you. He knows about the pier. He knows about the looped footage. He knows everything." He was spiraling. This was the one thing he could not control, the one variable that could break him. "He's bartering with your son's life," I said, my voice shaking with a cold fury of my own. "He will not stop," Mateo whispered, running a hand through his hair. "I give him the pier. He knows I am weak. He wants the rest. If I fight him, he takes my son." I walked over to him. I stood directly in front of him. I was no longer the nurse, no longer the contractor. I was the woman who had pulled his son from the river. "No," I said, my voice firm, cutting through his panic. "We do not bargain with a monster. We do not trade a pier for a child. That is not a choice. We protect Nico. We find the traitor. We end this. We do not ever negotiate with people who use children as currency." He looked at me, the fog in his eyes clearing. He saw the same unbending steel in me that he recognized in himself. I was not backing down. "He is right," Mateo said, his voice hardening, coming back to life. He placed his hands on my shoulders. "We protect Nico, and we hunt the men who did this. together. The boundary between us was gone. Kindness had not been bought. It had been forged. The plan was born from that shared terror. We were no longer employer and contractor. We were two people backed into a corner by the same threat. "He wants a war," Matteo said, his voice a low growl. "He wants the pier. He thinks I will trade my son for it, Mindoi." "So we give him a different target, Nahaisa." I said, the words coming out before I had fully processed them. Matteo looked at me. "What?" "Victor thinks Nico is your weakness. He thinks you have him locked away in this fortress. He's testing your defenses. First the river, then the car." I took a deep breath, my nurse's mind kicking in, looking for the next logical step. We have to change the narrative. We have to show him that Nico is not weak and that your security is not in the walls. It is with you. "You want me to take him outside?" Matteo was horrified. "I want to do the therapy session, the one I have been planning, the exposure therapy. Here in the pool I can have my men sweep the grounds." "No," I insisted. "Not here. Not in your house. He knows your house. He has eyes in your house. Or he did. We take him somewhere public, somewhere neutral, somewhere we can control the variables completely." He thought I was insane. I pressed on. "The Central Park Aquatic Center. We rent the entire complex for a private session. Tonight, it is open, it is clean, it has one public entrance and 4 emergency exits. We can secure those exits ourselves. You leak false information. You tell your network that you are inspecting a new shipment at Pier 39 tonight. You draw Victor's main force there. Then, you put your real security, the men you trust with your life, at the pool." I looked at him, my gaze unwavering. "Victor thinks he is hunting a hidden, terrified child. We will show him a child who is healing. We will show him you are not afraid. It is the one thing he will not expect." Matteo stared at me for a long time, the strategist behind his eyes calculating the angles. He was seeing the trap, a trap for Victor, using my son as bait. "Using your son as a survivor," I corrected him. "He's not bait. He's the reason you are fighting. Let Victor see what he is really up against. Not a gangster, but a father." He finally nodded, a slow, grim motion. "We do it, Mo." The hours that followed were a blur of cold, quiet preparation. Matteo moved with a lethal efficiency. He dispatched his most trusted guards, men I recognized as his personal detail, to the aquatic center. They were to sweep every locker, every vent, every pump room. He then very visibly, very loudly, had a separate conversation with Rocco DeSanto. He was telling him about the urgent inspection at Pier 39. He was putting his oldest friend in charge of the decoy operation. But Rocco was slippery. He found Matteo an hour before we were meant to leave. I was in the foyer with Nico, packing a small bag with his swim float and a towel. "Matteo," Rocco said, his voice smooth and concerned. "The team you have at the pool, they are your best, your personal guard. They should be with you at the pier. This Victor, he is not a joke." "The pool is secure," Matteo said, his voice flat. "Let my men handle it." "No," Rocco insisted. "The B team. They can guard a nurse and a child. You need your sharks with you. I have already taken the liberty of reassigning the detail. My men are already en route to the aquatic center. Your primary team will meet you at the pier." A cold dread washed over me. I looked at Rocco. He was changing the security roster, and he was inserting his own men, minutes before the operation. "Matteo," I said, interrupting. My voice was tight. "The primary team swept the building. They know the layout. Changing them now is a bad idea." Rocco turned his gaze on me, his eyes pale and reptilian. "This is family business, Miss Cole. You are here to teach a boy to float. Leave the security to men who understand it." Matteo looked from me to Rocco. He was torn. Rocco's logic was sound, if you were a mob boss, but my logic was sound, if you were walking into a trap. "Rocco's men are my men," Matteo said, but his voice lacked conviction. "It is done. Let us go." He had made a fatal miscalculation. He had underestimated the depth of the betrayal. Rocco knew. He knew the pier was a decoy. He knew exactly where we would be, and now his men were waiting for us. The Central Park Aquatic Center was a cavern of glass and steel. It was empty, echoing, and smelled sharply of chlorine. The huge glass roof showed the dark New York sky speckled with stars. It felt wrong, too exposed. Nico clung to my hand, his small body trembling. "It is big, Aaron." "I know," I said, forcing a calm I did not feel. "We're just going to float. We will find Cassiopeia through the glass." Matteo was not in the stands. He was on the deck, dressed in dark tactical gear beneath a simple tracksuit. His primary team, the ones he had recalled at the last minute after a hissed, furious argument with Rocco, were at the 4 emergency exits. Rocco's men, he had been assured, were on the perimeter, outside the building. "It is clear," Matteo said to me, his voice low. "We are secure." We were in the shallow end. I was holding Nico, guiding him through the breathing exercises. "Good, now blow the bubbles. You are the boss of the water." Nico put his face in the water and blew. He came up, sputtering and smiling. Then the world ended. It started with a click, a heavy, final thud. Every light in the complex died. The main lights, the walkway lights, even the illuminated exit signs. We were plunged into absolute, suffocating darkness. Nico screamed. "Matteo," I yelled, pulling Nico against me. A deafening alarm began to blare, a rhythmic, painful shriek. And then came the smoke. It was not the acrid smell of fire. It was a thick, chemical fog, pouring in from the air vents. It was designed to choke, to blind, to create panic. I heard shouting, gunfire, but it was muffled, strange. Thwack, 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 not bullets, rubber projectiles, gas launchers. This was not an assassination. This was an extraction. Through the fog, I saw them, figures in black tactical gear, masks on, pouring in from the locker rooms. Rocco's men. They were not on the perimeter. They were inside. "Grab the boy," a voice roared. They were fanning out, their flashlights cutting through the smoke. They were trying to separate us, to get between me and Matteo, who was shouting orders on the other side of the pool. A man lunged at me. He was huge. He grabbed for Nico. I had 1 second, one choice. I was not a fighter. I was a nurse. I was a rescuer. "Nico, hold your breath now." I did not wait. I clamped my arm around his small chest, tucked his head into my neck, and I threw us backwards off the steps, into the deep end of the pool. The water was a silent, cold shock. The alarms were a distant, throbbing pulse. We were underwater, in total darkness. Nico was panicking, his small legs kicking wildly, trying to get to the surface. I held him tight. I would not let him go. I kept my bearings, my hand trailing the rough tile of the pool wall. I had prepared for his panic. I had a small, soft rescue float clipped to my waist. I pulled the tab, inflating it just enough to be buoyant, and wedged it between us, giving him something to cling to. We needed air, but the surface was a war zone. I felt along the wall. My fingers brushed against a metal rung, a maintenance hook. I grabbed it, hooking my arm through it, anchoring us. I held us just 2 feet below the surface, hidden by the dark water and the roiling smoke above. Where was Matteo? I had insisted on one thing. If we were going to do this, we both wore beacons, small, waterproof wrist lights, for emergencies. I fumbled for the button on my own wrist. I pressed it. A tiny green light began to pulse, a beacon, just like the one on Nico's vest in the river. A moment later, a massive splash erupted near the deep end. A powerful, underwater flashlight beam sliced through the chlorine. Matteo, he had dived in. He saw my green light. He swam toward us, his face a mask of terrible, primal fury. He was not a chief executive officer. He was a shark. He grabbed my arm. He did not pull us up. He pulled us along the wall toward a small, dark opening I had not seen. A technical corridor, a maintenance tunnel. He shoved me and Nico through it, onto a damp concrete floor. "Stay here. Do not move," he commanded. He turned back to the opening, a gun now in his hand. A figure was blocking his path, a tall man in the same tactical gear. He slowly pulled his gas mask off. It was not one of Rocco's men. It was Victor Markov. The father, Victor sneered, his accent thick. You come to protect the cub. Yes, but you bring him to me. You should not have come here, Mateo growled. Victor smiled. He looked at the gun in Mateo's hand, then he looked at his own, and he dropped it, kicking it away. He wanted this. He pulled a long, curved knife from a sheath on his chest. They collided. It was not a fight. It was a butchering. It was grunts and the wet, hard sound of fists hitting bone. Mateo was bigger, fueled by pure adrenaline, but Victor was fast, and he had the blade. Victor slashed, a high, whistling arc. Mateo ducked, but the tip caught his shoulder. Ripping through the fabric and deep into the muscle, Mateo roared, a sound of agony, but he did not retreat. He slammed his body into Victor, pinning him against the concrete wall. They grappled, hand over hand, Mateo's blood pouring over both of them. His hands clamped on Victor's wrist, trying to stop the knife. The tunnel door at the other end burst open. Mateo. It was Rocco, and he was standing there, pistol raised, his silver hair perfect even in the chaos. Rocco here, Mateo grunted, shoving Victor back. Shoot him now. Rocco raised his gun. His hand was perfectly steady. He sighted down the barrel. He aimed it directly at Mateo's chest. My heart stopped. The world went silent. Mateo saw it. He froze. The realization, the absolute soul-shattering betrayal, washed over his face. He looked worse than when he was stabbed. It is over, Mateo, Rocco said, his voice calm, almost sad. The old ways are done. You and your sentiment. You are a relic. He smiled. Victor understands the new market. You. You are just a father. Victor laughed, spitting blood onto the floor. He is right. You are weak. You are finished. I was standing in the shadows, 5 feet away, clutching a shivering, silent Nico to my chest. I was invisible to them. I was just the nurse. My eyes scanned the corridor. It was a pump room, tools, gauges, and on a rack by the wall, a row of small, green emergency oxygen tanks, mini-O cylinders for emergencies. Rocco was savoring his monologue. Victor was enjoying the show. I did not think. I just moved. I grabbed one of the small, heavy tanks. Hey, Rocco, I screamed. He turned, his eyes widening in surprise. It was the last mistake he would ever make. I threw it. I threw it low and hard, the way they teach you in assault prevention. I aimed for his legs. The heavy steel tank spun, end over end, and connected with his shin. The sound was a sickening, wet crack of bone. Rocco screamed, a high, thin wail. His leg disintegrated beneath him. His shot went wild, blasting a chunk of concrete from the ceiling. It was all the time Mateo needed. Mateo did not look at Victor. He did not go for the knife. He launched his entire body, a 200-pound projectile of muscle and rage. At Rocco, he hit him full force, smashing him back against the wall. Rocco's gun flew from his hand, skittering into the darkness. Victor saw his opening. He did not help his new partner. He bolted. He ran for the exit, disappearing back into the smoke and the chaos of the pool deck. Mateo had Rocco on the ground. His hands were locked around Rocco's throat, lifting him off the concrete. You, Mateo hissed, his voice unrecognizable. You did this. The pier, the river. You tried to kill my son. Rocco was choking, his face a deep purple, his legs kicking uselessly. He was just a test, he gurgled, spitting blood and venom. A test for the beacon. An experiment. Every family has a price. Mateo, you forgot yours. You let this woman, this nurse, make you weak. Mateo roared. He raised his fist, the one that was not slick with his own blood, to end it. Mateo, no! I screamed. Stop! Look at your son! He froze. His entire body was shaking with a force that was not human. He looked at Rocco, then at me. And finally, his gaze fell on Nico, who was standing beside me, watching his father with huge, dark, terrified eyes. The rage did not just fade, it was beaten back. He held his fist in the air for one long, agonizing second. Then he lowered it. He did not kill him. He released his grip, letting Rocco fall, choking and broken, to the floor. Matteo slumped back against the wall, his hand grabbing his bleeding shoulder, his breath coming in ragged, painful gasps. The fight was over. The chaos outside the tunnel was a symphony of sirens. The alarm at the pool had triggered a massive police response. The flashing red and blue lights painted the smoked glass ceiling, turning the entire aquatic center into a surreal nightmare. Matteo was on the ground, leaning heavily against the concrete wall. His breathing was shallow, and his dark tracksuit was black and glistening where the blood had soaked through his shoulder. Rocco DeSanto was a broken heap a few feet away, moaning, his leg bent at an angle that made me sick. I ran to Matteo. My hands, still shaking, went into nurse mode. Let me see it. It is nothing, he grunted, but his face was pale, his skin clammy. You are bleeding heavily, I said, my voice sharp. I tore a strip of fabric from the clean towel in Nico's bag. This is going to hurt. Press down, as hard as you can. He took the makeshift pressure bandage and jammed it against the gash, hissing in pain. Nico, who had been silent through the whole ordeal, finally made a sound. He crept forward, his small, wet hand touching Matteo's arm. Papa the bad man is gone. He is gone, Nico, Matteo said, his voice raw. He reached with his good arm and pulled his son into a one-armed embrace, burying his face in the boy's damp hair. He's gone. It was like the river, Nico whispered, his voice trembling. He was not crying, he was processing, but darker, and the light, the green light. I know, Nico, the crane light, Matteo said, trying to soothe him. No, Nico said, pulling back just enough to look his father in the eyes. It was not a big light. It was a little light. It was buzzing. It came close. He held his hands up, about a foot apart. It was a buzzing thing, flying, with a green light. It watched me. My blood ran cold. Matteo and I looked at each other over Nico's head. A drone? The green light from the nightmares, the one that had haunted him, was not the massive indicator on a cargo crane. It was the eye of a drone, piloted by the man who had thrown him into the river. They were not just testing a beacon, they were filming it. Before I could speak, the tunnel door at the far end opened. This time, it was not Victor. It was one of Matteo's personal guards, the one named Luca. His face was grim. Mr. Valente, they are here. The police, and Assistant District Attorney Quinn. She is with them. She is taking command of the scene. Matteo nodded, a grim, calculated expression settling on his features. He pushed himself up the wall, grunting with the effort. Give me the memory card, Luca. Luca looked at Rocco, who was still on the floor, then back at his boss. He reached into his tactical vest and produced a small, silver memory card. The dash camera from the car that tailed Rocco's men here. It recorded everything. Their entry, their coordination, and this. He held up a small, smashed piece of black plastic. They found it on the roof, by the main vent. Victor's escape route. It is what is left of his drone. They are recovering the hard drive now, but he left this on the frame. Luca handed Matteo a small evidence bag. Inside, smeared on the plastic, was a perfect, bloody fingerprint. He was in a hurry, Matteo said. He got sloppy. The pieces were slamming together. My own investigation. The marine engineer I had hired, a man named Eric, had sent me his report just that morning. The global positioning system data from the beacon was not just a tracker. It was a transmitter, sending data packets. Eric had said the signal was too sophisticated for a simple beacon. It was communicating with a secondary device, a drone. The police, I said, my voice urgent. Matteo, they are going to arrest you. You are standing over a half-dead man, holding a gun. Quinn has been building a case. I know, he said. He looked down at his son. Then he looked at me. His amber eyes were clear, resolved. Stay with Nico. Do not leave his side, no matter what happens. He walked out of the tunnel, his bloody arm hanging uselessly. his good hand empty at his side. He left the gun on the floor. I scooped Nico up and followed him, staying in the doorway. The pool deck was a scene of controlled chaos. Police officers were rounding up Rocco's men, who had been systematically disarmed by Mateo's loyalists. Smoke still hung thick in the air. Assistant District Attorney Helena Quinn was standing in the center of it all, her sharp face illuminated by the flashing lights. She looked like a general surveying a battlefield. She saw Mateo, and her eyes narrowed. "Mateo Valente," she said, her voice ringing out over the noise. "This is an active crime scene." "It is," Mateo said, his voice calm. He walked toward her, stopping a few feet away, his loyal guard, Luca, fanned out, creating a perimeter. "And I have the criminals for you." He nodded toward Rocco, who was now being loaded onto a gurney by paramedics. "Rocco DeSanto, my former advisor, he orchestrated the attack tonight. He orchestrated the attempted kidnapping of my son at the East River. He did it in partnership with Victor Markov." Quinn's face was a mask of skepticism. "That is a convenient story. You get rid of your rival and your disloyal right-hand man in one night, and you leave yourself in charge." "I am giving you Rocco," Mateo said. "I am giving you the testimony of my men. I am giving you the black box footage from their cars." He took a deep breath, and I knew. In that second, he was about to set fire to his entire world. "And I am giving you the rest, Assistant District Attorney, everything, the old ledgers, the offshore accounts, the routes, the names, the entire black network you have been trying to piece together for a decade, the whole thing. I am handing you my father's entire organization on a silver platter." Quinn was stunned. She was speechless. "Why?" she finally stammered. "Why would you do that?" Mateo looked over his shoulder, his gaze finding me in the doorway. He looked at Nico, who was hiding his face in my neck. "Because he is right," Mateo said, his voice raw. "My son is not my weakness. He is my only strength, and I am done letting my father's sins put him in danger." Quinn, the prosecutor, smelled blood in the water. She regained her composure. "You are confessing to organized crime. To racketeering, you will spend the rest of your life in prison." "No," Mateo said, shaking his head. "I am offering you a deal. I am giving you the organization. I am giving you Victor Markov, or at least the evidence to hunt him down. In exchange, I cooperate. I plead to the legitimate charges, the financial ones. I clean my own house. I testify. I become your star witness against the entire Eastern Seaboard network. I get a cooperation agreement, a legal, binding path to legitimacy." Quinn was already shaking her head. "I cannot promise—" "And," Mateo cut her off, his voice like iron, "you grant full, federal witness protection to two people, non-negotiable." He turned and pointed directly at me. "Aaron Cole and my son, Nico Valente. They are to be moved to a secure location, effective immediately. They are not to be touched. They are not to be questioned without my consent. You will protect them from Victor, and you will protect them from the fallout of my own organization. That is the price for my father's world." Quinn stared at him. She was seeing her entire career flash before her eyes. This was the case that would make her the fall of the Valente Empire, handed to her by the king himself. "Get him a medic," she finally snapped to a nearby officer. "And get them out of here. Secure location now." She looked back at Mateo, her eyes cold, but with a new, grudging respect. "You and I, Mr. Valente, are going to have a very long night." Mateo did not look relieved. He looked like a man who had just amputated his own arm to survive. He walked over to me, ignoring the police and paramedics. He knelt in front of Nico, who was still clinging to me. "Hey, Papa," Nico whispered. "Hey, kid," Mateo said, his voice thick. He gently brushed the hair from Nico's eyes. "You are going to go on a little trip. Okay with Aaron, just for a little while. You are going to be safe." Nico's lower lip trembled. "Are you coming?" "Not yet," Mateo said. I have to clean up a big mess, Nico. A really big mess. But I will see you soon." He stood up, his gaze finding mine. He looked broken and whole, all at the same time. You saved him. Aaron. He corrected himself. You saved us. Tonight, and at the river. You saved my son twice. I shook my head, my throat tight. No, I did not. He saved himself. He knew how to hold his breath. He knew how to be brave. I just reminded him how to breathe. The space between us was electric. It was filled with blood and chlorine and the adrenaline of a shared survival. He was not my boss. He was just a man, bleeding and terrified, who had just set his entire life on fire for his child. My greatest fear, he whispered, so low only I could hear him, was not Victor. It was not prison. It was becoming someone my son would have to hide from. It was becoming my father. I wanted to reach out. I wanted to touch his face. I wanted to tell him it was over, but it was not. It was just beginning. You are not your father. Mateo, I said, my voice just as quiet. He looked at me, his amber eyes searching my face for something. A promise. An answer. I could not give him love. It was too complicated, too stained with blood and lies, but I could give him the one thing I had left. I will be honest with you, I whispered. Always. That is what I can promise. I will not lie to you, and I will keep him safe. It was not the passionate declaration he might have wanted, but it was the one he needed. It was real. It was a foundation. He nodded, as if my honesty was an anchor he could hold on to. He took a small step back, giving us space, both physically and emotionally. He was choosing to move forward, and he knew he had to do it by stepping away from the old world. His gaze held mine for one last second. When this is all safe, he said, his voice a rough promise. When the water is calm, I will ask you the question that I do not dare to ask tonight. Ask. A federal agent in a crisp, dark suit tapped me on the shoulder. Ma'am, it is time to go. I turned, holding Nico tight. I did not look back. I could not. I walked out of the aquatic center, away from the sirens, away from the blood, and away from the man who had just sacrificed an empire to save his son. The federal safe house was a sterile, quiet brownstone in a part of New York I did not recognize. It was anonymous, clean, and felt nothing like a home. It was a holding cell with comfortable furniture. For 2 days, Nico and I just breathed. We watched cartoons. I made him grilled cheese sandwiches. The agents outside our door were polite, silent ghosts. The world outside, however, was exploding. Mateo's deal had sent a shockwave through the city. The news was a feeding frenzy. Rocco DeSanto, his leg set in a cast, was arraigned on a staggering list of charges, from attempted kidnapping to conspiracy and racketeering. His confession, given in exchange for protection from Mateo's loyalists in prison, implicated dozens of others. The purge was swift. Mateo, working under the tight supervision of Assistant District Attorney Quinn, was cleaning his own house. Valente family members who had been part of the Black Network were given one choice: accept the new, legitimate structure and cooperate, or face the evidence Mateo was providing to the federal government. Most chose to cooperate. The ones who did not simply disappeared from the company rosters, their assets frozen, their power gone overnight. Victor Markov had vanished. The blood and the fingerprint from the drone were enough for an international warrant. Quinn's office, now armed with Mateo's internal ledgers, began to uncover the true, horrifying extent of Victor's operations. It was not just cargo, it was human trafficking, narcotics, a vast dark web of misery that he had been trying to root in Mateo's clean logistics network. The hunt for him went global. After 3 weeks, we were moved, not back to the compound, but to a new, secure apartment that Mateo had leased, one that was vetted and approved by Quinn's team. It was a compromise, a step toward a new life. The first test was the water. Nico's nightmares had not stopped. The dark pool had replaced the river. He would wake up screaming about the smoke, about the alarms. We have to go back, I told Mateo. He was visiting, his arm in a sleek black sling, his face etched with exhaustion but also a new, sharp clarity. Go back where? To a pool, but not at night, not in secret. A public pool in the bright, bright daylight. He fought me on it, his protective instincts screaming, but he had learned to trust my judgment in this, at least. We went to a community center pool, one I knew from my old neighborhood. It was loud. It was full of sunlight streaming through high windows. It was filled with dozens of other children, splashing and yelling and throwing neon-colored toys. Nico stood at the edge, his small hand gripping mine. He was wearing a new life vest, one he had picked out himself. It was bright yellow. "It is loud, Aaron," he whispered. "I know," I said, smiling. "That is the sound of fun. No one here is scared. Watch." He watched the other kids. He saw them jump from the low diving board, saw them splash each other, saw them float on their backs. "Papa is here," he said, looking for reassurance. I pointed up to the observation deck. It was a single row of empty metal bleachers. Except for one figure, Mateo sat alone, at the very top, watching. He was not wearing a suit. He was in jeans and a dark shirt. He was too far away to interfere, too far to control the situation. He was just a father, watching his son. He saw Nico look up, and he raised his good hand, waving. Nico waved back. He spent 20 minutes on the steps, just breathing, just watching. "Okay," he said, his voice small but firm. "I am ready." He did not jump. He just let go of my hand. He pushed off the step and floated on his stomach, his head turned to the side, breathing just like I had taught him. He paddled a few feet, then stood up, the water at his chest. He looked up at Mateo, and he beamed. Mateo did not cheer. He just clapped. A slow, steady, proud applause that echoed across the water. Nico turned back to me, his eyes shining. "I did it!" "You did, Nico, you did." He looked at the low diving board, where a line of children was forming. "Can I?" "You can try anything you want." He swam to the ladder. He climbed up. He stood on the end of the board, a tiny, determined figure. He looked down at the water. He looked up at his father. Then he looked at me. I nodded. "You are the boss of your breathing." He did not hesitate. He jumped. His form was terrible. He hit the water in a chaotic, painful-looking belly flop. He surfaced, gasping, and then he burst out laughing. It was the first truly free laugh I had heard from him. Mateo was on his feet in the stands, his applause loud and clear. He was healing. We were healing. My own 15 minutes of fame had shifted. The media, now fed the narrative of Rocco's betrayal and Victor's villainy, had a new angle. I was no longer the Mafia nanny. I was the East River hero, the woman who had not only saved the boy but had been the key to uncovering the entire conspiracy. My phone rang constantly. Talk shows, morning news programs, magazine editors. They all wanted the exclusive. They wanted the sensational story of the nurse who had lived inside the mob. I turned them all down. I gave one and only one interview. It was with a small local parenting blog. I did not talk about Mateo. I did not talk about Rocco or the shooting. I talked about water safety. I talked about the signs of secondary drowning. I talked about the importance of teaching children how to control their breathing, how to respect the water, but not fear it. I used my platform not for fame, but for my original purpose to be a nurse. And in the quiet, in the background, I finally dealt with my own ghosts. My lawsuit against the hospital was still pending. Mateo's lawyers, a team of sharks in $1,000 suits, had offered to make it disappear. I will not let them pay for it. I told Mateo. It is not payment, Aaron, it is justice. They tried to ruin you. I know, but I have to do this my way. I went to the settlement meeting alone. The hospital board and their smug lawyers were waiting for me, expecting me to be broken. They saw me as the woman who had gotten lucky, who'd fallen in with a powerful man. I did not ask for a single dollar. I told them I would drop the defamation suit and sign a non-disclosure agreement on one condition. They had to sign a binding agreement, a patient safety charter. That guaranteed a transparent inventory system for all sterile medical supplies, subject to an independent, quarterly audit. They were stunned. They argued. They said it was cost prohibitive. I smiled. That is fine. Then I will see you in court, and I will be subpoenaing the press. I am sure the East River Hero has a few things to say about hospital safety. I wonder which network will want that exclusive. They signed the charter within the hour. I walked out of that building feeling lighter than I had in years. I had not won a lottery. I had won a fight. I got my license back. 2 weeks later, I took a part-time job at a community health clinic in the Bronx. 3 days a week. It was my world. It was where I belonged. Our new life settled into a rhythm, a strange, fragile domesticity. Mateo was drowning in legal depositions, working with Quinn to dismantle the network he had inherited. But he made time. He changed. He started driving Nico to school himself, 2 days a week. His security was still there, a separate car that followed at a distance. But Mateo was the one holding his son's backpack. He was learning to let his guards step back 1 meter, as he put it. He was trading absolute control for simple trust. The scars, however, were real. Not just his, but mine. I had nightmares, not of the river, of the pool, the darkness, the alarms, the chemical smell of the smoke. I would wake up, my heart pounding, my lungs burning, convinced I was underwater. One night, I woke with a gasp, sitting bolt upright in my bed. My bedroom door opened. It was Mateo. He'd been staying on the couch, too exhausted to drive back to his empty compound. "Aaron?" His voice was low, concerned. "I am fine," I panted, my hands clenched in the sheets. It was just the pool, the dark. He did not turn on the light. He did not say, "It is over." He did not say, "You are safe." He walked over to my bed and sat on the edge, his back to me. He did not touch me. He just sat there, a solid, breathing presence in the dark. "I'm here," he said quietly. That was all. He did not try to save me with lies. He did not offer empty platitudes. He just stayed. He sat with me in the dark until my breathing evened out, until my heart stopped hammering against my ribs. After a long time, I reached out and put my hand on his shoulder. Not the one he had injured, but the other one. He was solid. Real. "Thank you," I whispered. He covered my hand with his own. His skin was warm. "We learned to breathe," he said, echoing my own words back to me. Together. We were learning how to be in the same room without rescuing each other, without being a boss and an employee, or a victim and a savior. We were just two people, marked by the same night, learning how to be still. Life began to feel almost normal. One Friday night, we stayed in. No guards in the hallway, no depositions, no clinic, just the three of us. We were making pizzas from scratch. Nico was in charge of the pepperoni, and he was making a terrible mess. "I think," Nico announced, holding up a piece of dough, "that my float needs a name." "Oh yeah," I said, trying to wipe flour off his nose. "He needs a name because he was brave in the pool. He is my friend." He thought for a moment. "I will call him Captain Brave." Mateo and I locked eyes over Nico's head, a smile, a real, unguarded smile. "Captain Brave," Mateo said, his voice full of a warmth I had never heard. "I like that. A very good name." After we ate, I started clearing the plates. Mateo stood up and took one from my hand. "I can get those," I said. "I know." He paused, and in that moment he looked almost shy. The boss of the 5 boroughs, the man who had faced down Victor Markov, looked uncertain. May I wash the dishes, Aaron?" It was such a simple question. It was not a command. It was not an assumption. It was a request. He was asking permission to serve, to be a partner. I stepped back from the sink. "Yes, Mateo, you can." He rolled up his sleeves, wincing slightly as it pulled on his healing shoulder, and plunged his hands into the warm, soapy water. I stood there, watching him, as Nico chattered on about Captain Brave, and for the first time, in a long time, My apartment in New York felt like a home. 1 year, 365 days. That is how long it takes to dismantle an empire and start to build a life. The city was rebuilding again, as it always does. The waterfront was the new focus, the old industrial piers being turned into parks and glass-walled condominiums, and at the heart of it was Pier 39. It was no longer the dark, foreboding cargo hub where my story had truly begun. It had been scrubbed clean, not just by Matteo's lawyers, but by his money, now legitimate, and his vision. Today was the festival, the grand reopening. It was a bright, breezy day in October, the air crisp with the promise of autumn. The pier was unrecognizable. It was filled with families, food trucks, and music, and at the very center, on a small, tasteful stage, was a large banner, the Safe Water, Safe Kids Foundation. I was not on the stage. I was on the docks, wearing a red windbreaker that said Volunteer Rescue on the back. I was coordinating the first aid stations and the water safety demonstration team. It was my element, the noise, the logistics, the potential for crisis that I knew how to manage. Matteo was on the stage. He was not in a tuxedo. He was in a simple dark suit, his arm no longer in a sling, though I knew the scar tissue on his shoulder still pulled when he moved the wrong way. He looked lighter. The shadows behind his eyes were still there, but they no longer ruled him. He was speaking to the crowd, his voice calm and clear, without the old edge of command. We stand here, he was saying, because this river is a part of our city, and for too long it has been a place of danger, a place of endings. Today, we make it a place of beginnings, the Safe Water. Safe Kids Foundation is not charity. It is an investment. It is a promise that every child in this city will learn to respect the water, to be safe in it, to know how to breathe. He finished his speech. The applause was polite, genuine. He was no longer the reclusive mogul. He was becoming a benefactor. His transformation was public, painstaking, and, as I knew from the long nights of depositions, absolutely binding. Valente Logistics was now Valente Green Logistics. The old routes were gone. The old money was gone. Handed over to the federal government in the largest RICO settlement in the city's history, many of his old employees had been retrained, given jobs in the new legitimate company. The ones who had refused were in prison, or had simply vanished. He stepped off the stage, bypassing the politicians and the news crews, and walked straight to me. He did not care that I was in a windbreaker and sneakers. "How is it?" he asked, his eyes scanning the crowd. "Not for threats, but for families." "It is good," I said, checking my watch. "The swim demo is in 5. Nico is about to burst with excitement." He smiled. He has been practicing his rescue stroke all week. He informed me he is now a better swimmer than I am. He is not wrong, I laughed. Just then, my phone buzzed in my pocket. It was not a call. It was a text, and then an email. I opened the email. It was from a secure, anonymous address, but I knew who it was from. The subject line was empty. The message was only 6 words. "Victor Markov, arrested, Baltic Port. You chose healthy, not sides." It was from Assistant District Attorney Helena Quinn. I let out a breath I did not know I had been holding for a year. It was over. The last ghost, the final threat, was gone. Victor was in custody. The past was finally, truly in the past. Matteo must have seen the change in my face. "Aaron, what is it?" I showed him the phone. He read the 6 words. He did not celebrate. He did not look relieved. He just looked at me. A profound, heavy understanding passing between us. He reached out and touched my arm. Just for a second, the last chain had been broken. Later that evening, the festival was over. The crowds were gone. The pier was quiet, lit only by the soft, new safety lights. We had sent Nico home with Luca, who was now his full-time, state-approved security and part-time uncle. It was just us. The air was cold. It had started to rain, a soft, misty drizzle that was nothing like the storm that had started all of this. My sneakers were soaked. "You should get inside," he said. I like the rain, I said, walking to the edge of the pier, looking at the dark water. I was not afraid of it. Not anymore. He walked with me. We stood there for a long time, just watching the lights of Manhattan glitter on the surface. There were no guards. There were no chandeliers. There was just the river and the smell of wet concrete. I made a promise to myself, he said, his voice low, making me turn to look at him. I told myself I would not ask you until it was safe, until Victor was gone, until I was a man you could choose, not a man you were trapped by. My heart did not pound. It just stilled. Aaron, he said, and he was nervous. The man who had faced down assassins was nervous. I do not have an empire to offer you. I do not have a fortress to protect you. All I have is a complicated life, a son who adores you, and a company I am trying to build from the ashes. He reached into his pocket. He did not get down on one knee. He did not make a grand gesture. He just stood in front of me, in the rain, and opened his hand. In his palm was a small velvet box. He opened it. The ring was not a massive, glittering diamond. It was a simple, elegant band of white gold, and the stone was not a diamond, Varese. It was a single, round, perfect aquamarine, the color of the sea. It was set in a smooth, round bezel. It reminded me of a lifebuoy, he whispered, a small, shy smile touching his lips. The first thing I ever saw you use, the first time you showed me what real strength was. He did not ask me to marry him. He did not ask for forever. He just held out the ring. Matteo, I whispered, my throat tight. Whoa, you do not have to answer, he said quickly. I needed to ask the question I did not dare ask that night. I looked at the ring. I looked at his face. I saw the man from the riverbank, the terrified father. I saw the man in the kitchen asking to wash the dishes. I saw the man who had sat in the dark with me while I fought my nightmares. I did not say yes. I took the ring from the box, and with a hand that was not shaking at all, I slid it onto my own finger. He stopped breathing. I am not a mafia wife, Matteo, I said, my voice clear and strong. I will not be. I am a nurse. I am the woman who runs the clinic in the Bronx. I am the woman who will argue with you when you are wrong. I know, he said, his voice thick with emotion. He reached up, his hand calloused and warm, and cupped my face. That is who I am asking. He leaned in and kissed me. It was not a kiss of desperation or ownership. It was not the kiss of a boss. It was a kiss of partnership. It was slow and sure, and it tasted like the rain. We made a vow, not just to each other, but to Nico. We stood on that pier, and we promised him and ourselves that we would remember the new family creed, that power was not for control or for fear. Power only mattered when it protected the vulnerable. The next day, we officially opened the small museum at the entrance to the foundation. It was just one room, a testament to the new beginning. We had one exhibit. I held up the old, faded, bright yellow life vest, the one Nico had named. Are you sure, Nico? I asked. He nodded, his 7-year-old face serious. Captain Brave did his job. He can retire now. He took the float from me and placed it on the small pedestal. Then, he took a small, clear case from his pocket. Inside it were his very first pair of swimming goggles, the ones he had worn when he had made his first terrified bubbles in Matteo's pool. He placed the goggles right next to Captain Brave. The circle was closed. That night, the three of us were on the pier again. The rain had started, that same soft drizzle. Nico was running ahead, jumping in puddles, unafraid. Matteo put his arm around my shoulders, pulling me close. His new ring was a simple gold band, solid and warm against my skin. When you dove into that river, Aaron, he said quietly, his voice a low rumble against my ear, you did not save a mafia kid. You did not just save Nico. He paused, looking at his son, who was laughing, his face turned up to the sky. You saved the part of me that still wanted to breathe. I leaned my head against his shoulder. The rain was cold, but I was not. We were not afraid of the water anymore. We were not afraid of the dark. We had learned how to breathe together. Thank you so much for listening to my story. I am so curious. Where in the world are you listening from? Please let me know in the comments below. I would love for us to connect and share our thoughts. If you enjoyed this, please consider subscribing to my channel, Mafia Boss Stories, and give this video a like. And if you really want to help, please press that hype button so this story can be heard by even more people. Thank you again.